All right, round two. Let's talk tariffs and how they're going to affect the regular car industry. Forget collector cars. To start with, let's read. Let's not read it. It's very long, but let's skim over the White House proclamation. It started in 2019 when the initial tariffs were considered. And of course, they were just enacted as a result of an executive order here. The funniest thing I found, maybe it's not funny, I found it funny, is if you were to read this entire proclamation and play a drinking game, anytime threat to national security came up, you would die of alcohol poisoning before you got to the end.
I did, and this is purely an opinion on what the words that were in there, that was in there more than the whole like save American manufacturing thing. Like it was all just like, that is a load bearing reason for this whole thing is the national security business.
And let me be honest, if we're going to use a Porsche analogy, I feel like the threat to national security is the IMS bearing of this whole
hold
thing.
Hold on a second now, Doug.
Like, I just don't buy it, right? Okay, I understand that during COVID, the whole global manufacturing thing was an issue. Supply chain was an issue. But it was an issue for luxury items for the most part. It was an issue because people couldn't get their heated seats optioned in their top trim line Cadillac Escalades.
Yeah.
Like, every country dealt with that because we are a global economy, right? Like there's no advanced economy in today's world that is an island, right? We all rely on other countries for manufacturing, for shipping, for all sorts of different things, for produce, for you name it.
Isn't Australia just like a really big island though?
We're all really big islands, Tyler. All of them. It's called a continent. Anyway, jeez. It's actually a really small island in the grand scheme of things. Why you got to distract us like that? Gosh darn it. Trying to produce a real podcast here. So, yes, but because of national security, not primarily, apparently, because we need to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., which I have an opinion on that as well. There is an ad valorem, according to value tariff of 25% that applies to any automobile not manufactured in the U.S. As I read this, and as I have spoken with other people, it is new or used. So for people importing cars, especially dealers that like to buy cars from Canada, this is a very big deal.
Is that a common practice for cars that are essentially this, like they have a North American specification that is, you know, not 25 years old? Can you bring in like an appliance car, like a Corolla from Canada? Okay.
Yep. Some of them are optioned slightly differently, and you have to get a letter of compliance, but it's very easy. All North American spec cars are North American spec. So I'm friends with the dealer. So Chris Benvey of McGovern Auto was very helpful. In his opinion, they own, I believe, 26 different brands and multiple stores in those brands. They have foreign and domestic brands. So he had a really good perspective on it. He's up on all this stuff. But they import 300 or so cars from Canada every month.
Whoa.
So this is a massive deal.
Holy moly.
Massive deal. And obviously that market can change at any point with the exchange rate. 20 years ago, I was selling cars to Canada like crazy because the demand was high up there and the exchange rate was better for them. However, like the tariff thing isn't new for other countries. I lose a lot of deals to Canada, or have lost a lot of deals, because their import tax is like 13 to 15%. Ooh. So buyers up there just have to consider that when they're bringing them in. We only have a 2.5% duty on pre-owned cars. historically. So in some sense, it's just kind of evening the playing field. Now, 25% is a little
That's
bit
a bigger
more.
number.
But I mean, the people in Australia are laughing, right? If they want to import a car, it's close to 100%.
Whoa.
And there's a lot of other small countries that are similar.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I'm sorry for all the car enthusiasts in Australia. I mean, you got the V8 Falcons, but you shouldn't have to pay this much.
So as much as we see this as a shock because it happened all at once, this is nothing new under the sun for a lot of other countries. A lot of people are used to these kinds of massive tariffs on importing used cars that are not, their specific domestic market.
Which, I don't understand, regardless of either of the reasons that, whether it's written in the thing or it's what's being, thrown around, I don't understand how a used car falls under that reasoning. I think it's, when this is, we're flirting with not, stuff we don't want to talk about, but I find that interesting.
Talk about it, right? We said we don't talk about politics unless it's related to cars. This is very political and it's very much car related. Cars are at the center of this.
I just don't see how the used car portion of this is anything other than a way to drive people to buy new American cars, which kind of goes in line with some of the other reasonings, but it's the same way that I feel about how Ohio treats sales tax considering trade-ins on used cars. If you trade in a car towards a used vehicle, you still have to pay the whole sales tax, where in a lot of other states that actually reduces the amount of that you pay in the final purchase price in sales tax. So if you trade in a car worth $40,000 on an $80,000 car, you only pay $40,000 sales tax on the $40,000.
Correct. That's a very good analogy that I did not think of.
Pulling my weight, Ethan.
No, that's a perfect analogy, and the law is written in Ohio so that people will buy new cars. It's to benefit the new car dealers.
Yes.
And the supposed point of this tariff is to benefit American brands, right? Make America great again, bring manufacturing back. But approximately 50% of all cars sold in the United States are manufactured here. Now, media outlets are touting this as more than 50% are not manufactured here. It's a very small amount more. So you could also say almost half are made here. That's a pretty darn big number.
With how many cars that we consume as a society, that is a ton.
Right. Interestingly enough, too, the percentage of U.S. sales imported. So on one end of the spectrum, you have Volvo and Mazda between 80 and 90% of their cars are imported. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have Ford at about 20%. So there's no zeros. Honda is at 40% imported. Stellantis is just above them, and General Motors is just above them, right?
So what are you telling me about American manufacturers, Doug?
Well, we've known this for a long time. BMW, Toyota, Honda have plants here. They're making a lot of cars here. Now, what's interesting and yet to be seen is the specifics on how the parts tariffs are going to affect this. Yes. Because in the declaration, it says that they are going to essentially finalize this tariff, and that will be finalized by May 3rd, 2025. And they may change them or not change them prior to that. And a lot of American companies, again, we are in a global economy. A lot of American companies and companies manufacturing cars here are assembling cars here. So even if you say, well, it's going to bring manufacturing here, it's not going to bring all manufacturing here. So there's going to be a cost across the board to all manufacturers, regardless if they have an American brand name on the door or if they have a manufacturing facility here. It's all going to affect the cost. And the cost is going to be passed on to consumers for the most part.
Well, when you think it's not only the cost of the additional duty or tariff, whatever it ends up being, if the companies do decide to begin manufacturing some of the parts or the cars or whatever in the U.S., there's also the cost that they need to put forth to build the facility. It's not like a manufacturing facility for anything can be brought up in 2 months.
Right.
This is a years-long process that is millions and millions of dollars.
Billions.
But yeah, but it's like
Billions.
it is insane, and then you have to you have to train and staff the facility. It is very challenging, at least in the parts of the industries that I have awareness of, to staff factory jobs. There's a lot of turnover, which is not highly incentive. There's a lot of things that go into this. Lots of things. It's not just flip a switch and then suddenly we're making a bunch of stuff.
Correct. And that's where so many thoughts in relation to that. One, that's where this could be temporary. Trump is a big fan of the flip a switch type of action, right? As a quote unquote chess move, at least if you're a, super Trumper, that everything he does is a chess move.
Yep.
If you're an anti-Trumper, everything he does is insane, right?
Yeah.
This is like kind of an insane chess move. You're like, what's happening here?
Yeah.
But you would think that he would say there's a year deadline or 2-year deadline in order to bring a percentage of your manufacturing here. Otherwise, you'll be subject to this, right? Instead, it's just boom, today, roll it out. That is not winning him any supporters on this tariff for the most part, even among the people who identify with his political ideals. Oh, man. I had so much.
I just kind of unloaded. I was on a tear. I apologize. Take a moment to consolidate your thoughts.
If the point of this is to bring manufacturing back to the U.S. and or make it more competitive, there's a lot of other ways you could do this besides taxing other countries, right? So let's say, I think in the report, it said that approximately they would expect $100 billion in revenue to the federal government as a result of these tariffs. Well, those $100 billion, at least initially, is coming directly at the expense of jobs. Now, those may be jobs overseas, right? So it's mostly harming companies overseas that are manufacturing stuff. And I guess Trump would say, well, we don't care about that. We are pro-America. This is a very nationalist type order. I think there's other ways to do that. Maybe do away with the unions, right? A lot of the foreign corporations that have manufacturing facilities here do not have unions, and they are far more competitive as a result. Now, that is going to be highly controversial, right? Can't be anti-union. Oh, no, they're protecting against greedy billionaire corporations. Okay, I could go down a whole rabbit trail about unions, but let's just take that as a possible alternative to slapping a giant tax on every car imported. Another problem. So it's almost this perfect storm, right? So on one hand, Trump is deporting all the illegal aliens / migrant workers / whatever you want to call them. And a lot of them are definitely here illegally and shouldn't be, but a lot of them are here working and doing the jobs that Americans won't. So you're deporting possible workers, and then you're also saying, well, we need to bring manufacturing here. But you're also driving up costs for the consumers, and we already have a massive skills gap, and some would say a wage gap as well. But like Mike Rowe has harped on and on about the skills gap, where there are not people that are either qualified or willing to work manual labor jobs, trade jobs, manufacturing, stuff like that. So it's like Trump wants to bring all of this manufacturing back, but then he's deporting all the workers that would do the jobs. And then we also have this student loan crisis and this push to go to college and get advanced degrees. So this all comes kind of full circle to, like, I'm not sure what problem he's solving without creating other bigger ones. But taking a step back, I'm not sure that it is a problem that we don't have manufacturing primarily as the driver of our economy. And this goes back to Rostow's theory of growth.
I specifically didn't look this up because I wanted you to tell me what it was.
Ready for this? I had to look it up. I remembered what I thought was 4 economic stages from my college econ class. Rostow's theory of growth identifies 5, but essentially it's talking about the linear progression of an economy. You start as a subsistence economy, right? You're farming, you're living off the earth, like you don't have a currency, you are just subsisting. And you grow and you move into a growth economy, you move into like an industrial economy, a manufacturing economy, you're producing. And then the final stage of an advanced economy is a consumption economy. Essentially, when you have become so wealthy, and most Western economies are in this stage, you become so wealthy that you don't need to produce, you don't need to manufacture, you are just consuming, right? You're almost like an entertainment economy, which I was just in Orlando this weekend. My goodness, you want to talk about an entertainment economy? That is it. It is an entire world built around fantasy and stuffing your face with food and like excitement and stuff like that, right? Yes, there also needs to be people building the rides and carnies to operate them and all that. But like America is a consumption economy. And you can take that to an extreme and say, well, oh man, have you seen WALL-E? Like that's a terrible thing. In some senses it is, if like all we do is stare at our screens and like go on cruises and go to all you can eat buffets, right?
Yeah. The version of that portrayed in WALL-E is terrible.
But
great movie.
National security aside, if we say, well, let's lean into that. Let's allow other growing economies who have cheaper labor and have people who are willing to do those jobs and coming up through the ranks, learning those skills. Like we are a global economy. So why not ship manufacturing to China or to Africa? Again, apart from the national security concerns, if we're fully dependent on a dictatorial economy who has a crazy leader who wants to, destroy the world, that is a problem. We have to have, a mix of both. But like, why this push for manufacturing? It like the workforce doesn't exist. I don't know if we even need this.
Yeah, and all it's going to do, as we're kind of bringing her back around to the thing I put the pin in, is, I'm going to be living the experience of trying to buy a late model used car. I'm going to have to go to a car dealer, Doug. I haven't done this ever.
So this is for your girlfriend.
Yes, for my girlfriend.
Right.
So she needs...
you're shopping normal cars, late model.
A normal car. She already knows what kind of car she wants. I didn't need to approve it, but I think she's got good taste, so we're all good there. But it's going to be going to a normal car dealer, looking at a normal used car that's a couple years old. It's going to go up in price. I guarantee you that in this realm of the transportation of the normal cars, especially the late model used, everything is going to increase. Absolutely. I don't know if I believe it's going to be all, a full matchy 25% each way or whatever it ends up being, but they're going to have to, because you're shifting cars into potentially different price brackets.
Correct.
And now people are going to be like, well, I want the used one to save some money, which is just going to drive up the demand for those.
Rising tide lifts all ships / trickle down
yes
effect.
So all the Honda Civics and all the Toyota Camrys and all the everything is going to get more expensive. And honestly, cars are already expensive.
They're very expensive. And let's camp on that for a little bit, right? So new cars are already not selling super well because the manufacturers kind of too little too late, or too much too late, raised MSRPs on cars to respond to the COVID-flation. But they did it after that had happened, when the market was already correcting. So then you like reverse this supply and demand inequality and flipped it to where all of a sudden, like, people are going, man, I'm not paying for that, which drove the used car market high already. I talked to a big dealer group last week, a friend of mine who's a buyer. He said they were 200 cars short on their used car inventory of just like where they're supposed to be. The used car market was already hot. The wholesale black book market went up last week prior to the tariffs. Now they're just going to go up more.
You know, this is kind of weird because at the end of last year, we submitted our cars to Carvana. I still get emails from them and they're like, your Volvo went up $4,000. And I'm like, holy crap.
Well, but they started at like $2,000.
Yeah. So it was trash. But I was like, wow.
They're just coming up to reality.
That's going to be my barometer is the Carvana updates on the values of my cars that I entered 6 months ago.
Carvana's stock is going to go up again. They've been dealt another friggin', lifeline. Not that, I mean, whatever. Depending on where you stand on that, they didn't need one. But so used cars definitely going to go up in value, especially late model. I think it's basically going to be a graph, right? So like new cars are going to be affected the most. What it's probably going to do in the short term, obviously, dealers are just going to sell out of their stock. Car dealers that had a lot of inventory are finally going to be able to sell the stuff they couldn't sell before. And then slightly less, you're going to have late model used cars going up in value to basically say people are not going to pay the premium for the cars coming in under the new tariff. Now, some manufacturers have announced that they're going to absorb some of it. Ferrari on the high end of things said they're going to absorb 10% of it and pass the other 15% on to consumers. Ferrari can do that. They made record profits last year.
I think they're doing all right.
Yeah. Porsche is not necessarily in quite the position to absorb that. So, and probably a lot of other manufacturers aren't. Stellantis, right? But a lot of manufacturers, according to our source, Chris Benby, a lot of them are taking a wait and see approach. Because I think a lot of them are essentially thinking or they're calling Trump's bluff, going, this is an action to make us move our manufacturing or take certain action or to get other governments to drop their tariffs or whatever, and it's not going to be a permanent thing. So if you didn't buy a car before last weekend and you were in the market, you should probably either buy one today or wait like 6 months, depending on what you believe, because I think the initial reaction is going to be the strongest reaction, and then things will settle out and work their way through the market. But like 10-year-old used cars, again, they'll be impacted some because as newer used cars go up in value, people will buy older cars. But I think it's going to be a graph of like the older you get, the less the car will be impacted by value.
Well, we're going to find out because I am looking at both new cars and old cars at the moment for different reasons. And I do think that a lot of people, and I think we touched on this in the last episode, that a lot of people are wondering, do I just buy a car now or should I have bought one 5 days ago or whatever? I think the same logic should apply is that if you are not ready and you don't need to, then don't make a rash financial decision. In my opinion, even though this isn't financial advice technically, but in my opinion, I wouldn't make a rash financial decision out of fear of this. But if you, like in the case of my girlfriend, she kind of needs a car. So we're going to see how this goes. Like if it becomes ridiculous, we're probably not going to make a move and she'll like maybe put some maintenance money into her current car, but it's kind of almost a need at this point.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens.
Yep. I don't think used cars are not going up 25% in value overnight. Good stuff. Another great quote by Chris. Good stuff is going to be impacted upwards. It's going to go up. And he said, it's not a direct quote, but he said like turds are still going to be turds. Like people, a $5,000 car is not going to be $7,000. It's still a junker. And I not to call my customer's car a junker, but we're working a trade deal for like a 2019 or 2020 Camaro. And it's an okay car. It's a V6. It's got some body damage, whatever, low miles. And I'm getting the same numbers on trade as I was 3 weeks ago when we first started talking about it, right? And I'm like, oh, tariffs, it's a late model American car.
Yeah.
Nope, nobody cares, right? It's still just a Camaro with some body damage. And like it really practically hasn't impacted stuff drastically, but it is certainly putting a choke on the overall supply, and that will impact demand if you believe in basic economic theory. All right. Well, we've hammered that nail in the coffin of the dead horse to
there
mix
it is.
Lots of metaphors.
Yeah.
I like my metaphors shaken, not stirred. Okay, let's do. I've modified the Shrewd Negotiator segment. No, we'll call it just a new segment. We're going to call it advice people shouldn't ask for on the internet.
Oh, I love this. Let's
but they do anyway. This is from the Car Club where everyone acts like millennials post, although probably also big Ultima energy because it is an Ultima coupe. This person posts. I was door dashing. My app was messing up and it caused an accident. I rear-ended someone. I had repeatedly reported my issues with the app before the accident. Is DoorDash liable for my car repairs? My insurance denied.
Oh, did they now? Shocking.
I mean, one, you shouldn't post this on the internet that you were
using a phone while you were distracted driving.
Yes, your app did not cause your accident unless you were looking at it. But this is something you should ask an attorney, not the internet.
I feel like you might get laughed at.
Oh,
Unless you find a really crooked attorney and they're like, oh no, sure, for sure, bud.
The bigger problem with asking for advice like this on the internet is that people will give you very strong opinions as if they are CPAs or attorneys or other things that you were required to be licensed in order to give that advice. And yet people on the internet, I see tax advice all the time on the internet that is just ridiculous and wrong. And it's nuts.
Did OP get dragged? Like they were finna get?
OP finna get dragged, yes, but also got some very well-meaning and terrible advice. This episode is brought to you by Sheffield All Sport Watches. The Sheffield brand was recently revived by Jay Turkbus, an owner of an original Sheffield All Sport diver he received from his parents in 1970 when he was just 11, beginning his love of watches. As an adult, Jay used his extensive expertise in product development and marketing to revive the brand that started it all. He set out to develop watches with a high level of quality and specification at a value price. His first effort, and a successful one in July of 2023, was the debut of the Sheffield All Sport Diver 1. It had the kind of build and movement that much more expensive watches use, and his debut price of $108 was equivalent to the $13 his parents paid back in 1970. Since that debut, Sheffield has expanded to a wider range of automatics and chronos, many designed around vintage Sheffield dials of the 60s. The Sheffield well of clever and unique design remains his inspiration, as well as maintaining the goal of high-quality, very affordable range of automatic and quartz watches. Sheffield Watches, value on merit, not just price. I love mine. Get yours at sheffieldwatches.com and mention that you heard about them on SwitchCast. Thank you for joining us for SwitchCast with Doug Tabbutt and Tyler Sanders, produced by Ethan Huffnagel. SwitchCast is an automotive entertainment and opinion show, and nothing we say should be taken very seriously. We do not give tax, investment, legal, emotional, or professional advice, and the only licenses we hold are driver's licenses. The opinions expressed on this show are exclusively held by the people pontificating at that moment and do not reflect the values of our producers or sponsors. Our theme music is provided by Emily and Ivory. You can stream their full album on Spotify or SoundCloud. If you like this show, you can stream it in its entirety on your favorite audio podcast platform. Check out switchcast.live for more info.